Ladies and gentlemen, this is Veterans in Transition. This afternoon, we're speaking to Mr. Carl Sharperson, who's a class of 1976 United States Naval Academy and a former Marine. He was a Marine captain and an aviator. And we welcome Mr. Sharperson to our session this afternoon. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Carl, could you please tell us about your home and growing up?
Yeah, I was born in Washington, D.C., formerly known as Chocolate City. Uh, Grew up in an environment where everybody looked like me, knew everybody from the time I was born to the time I was in the eighth grade, played sports. Uh, Dad decided to move us to Spotsylvania, Virginia, about 60 miles south of Washington, D.C., halfway through my eighth grade year. So I go from a environment where everybody knows me and looks like me to an environment where nobody likes me, doesn't want me there. So I integrated to school halfway through my eighth grade year in Spotsylvania, Virginia. A very powerful, influential time in my life. Got called names, developed a mindset of it's not what you call me, it's what I answer to. My So I went to school there, and my ninth grade year went out for football for the first time. Coach Sparks, who's the third most influential person in my life, gave me a talk I'll never forget. We got our pads for the first time. He said, "You got your pads. If you don't want to play, come back tomorrow, turn them in. But if you stay until tomorrow, I need you to stay until the end of the season because quitters never win and winners never quit." He said, "If you quit my football team, you might quit school. Quit school and get married, you might quit your spouse. Have kids, you might quit your kids because once you quit the first time, it's easy to quit the next time." So I stuck it through, didn't have fun. Fast forward, my senior year in high school, I'm the most valuable player of the football team. Uh, so, um, so I grew up there. I played sports, played on a championship baseball team, and really had some very life-changing experiences in that environment. What I found out was everybody wants the same thing. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what your sex is. Everybody wants the same thing. They want to be loved, they want to be respected, and they want to be successful. So I learned those lessons at a very young age growing up in Spotsylvania, Virginia. My dad was a Mumford Point Marine, uh, World War II Marine, and I really didn't know a whole lot about that until I actually entered the Naval Academy and he started talking about
Okay, Carl Sharperson, now you're a senior at Spotsylvania High School. You're a star football player and baseball player. Uh, now, now we begin to see the influence of your parents. How influence how explain their influence on you as a young man.
it. Yeah, my dad was a provider for the family. Um, I never heard him say that he loved me
Mm.
until I had brain surgery at the age of 28. But I knew that he loved me because of his behaviors and because of what he did. Um, so he had three different jobs. He was a cab driver who drove 60 miles from Spotsylvania, Virginia to Washington, D.C. He was a presser at the Marine Shop in Quantico, Virginia. And he was a night watchman at the Sheraton Motor Inn. And then eventually, when he got older in life, he used to sell stuff. Anything he could buy and make a profit on, he'd buy it and sell it. My mother, I never heard my mother say a disparaging word about anybody. Had a sixth grade education. She was the daughter of a Virginia tobacco sharecropper, and but she could read. By the time she was an adult, she was a master chef, master cook, baker, master seamstress, homemaker, and she was actually a confidant all the people in the neighborhood. They used to call her and get advice.
Mm.
So that combination really gave me a great platform for navigating life.
So that's great. That's great to hear, Carl. I had not understood how influential your mother was. I knew that your father had been a Montfort Point Marine, one of the first Black Marines to come into the Marine Corps, 1942 forward. So it's great to know how influential your mother was. Now, why did you attend the Naval Academy? How did that happen, Carl Sharpson? Take us from
Well,
spot
see,
to
it was,
to the Naval
I wish I could say it was a plan, but
Academy.
this is what had happened. So this same coach, the third most influential person in my life, Coach Sparks, my football coach, told me one day when I was in the 10th grade sweeping up the locker room. He said, Carl, what do you want to do after you graduate from high school? I said, I don't know, coach. He said, if you don't get an education, you'll be sweeping floors the rest of your life. He said, if you apply yourself, I can help get you a scholarship. My junior year, he was the baseball coach of the baseball team. We win the championship. Shortly after that, he leaves. I don't know why he leaves. There was some scuttlebutt. Didn't know why he left. Right. Um, my senior year in high school, after the football season, me and two other guys get called to the office. We don't know why we're getting called to the office. In walks this guy, 6'2", blue suit, white shirt, blue tie, white cover, and he says, I'm from the Naval Academy and I want to recruit you to play football. His name is Tom Flaherty, graduated in 1972 from the Naval Academy. He played football and was doing some recruiting for Rick Fasano. So he comes in and talks to the three of us, gives us his pitch. Graduated from high school 1971. Vietnam War was still going on. The other two guys walked out. They said, I'm not going to Vietnam. I stayed and listened because my dad always told me never turn down an opportunity that you haven't been offered. So I
Mm-hmm.
listened. I listened to him, went home and talked it over with my dad. My dad says it's a great opportunity, great education. Because when he was a cab driver, he said he used to pick up midshipmen and take them different places when they flew in. He said they were cheap. That's one of the things he remembers. They were very cheap. But anyway, so he was well read. And I said, well, nobody else has offered me a scholarship. So I'm going for it. So I applied to the Naval Academy. I did not get in because I was not academically competitive. My GPA and my SAT scores were not competitive. So I applied. They offered to send me to a preparatory school because based on the Naval Academy Foundation, which is a scholarship fund that funds students for prep school before they go into the Naval Academy. I had an opportunity to go to NAPS or I could go to this private school. I went to the private school because if you go to NAPS, you have an obligation if you don't get in. See, I don't like that, so I did the other route. So I spent a year at Marine Military Academy, southern tip of Texas, Harlingen, Texas. Learned to study for the first time. I didn't realize that when you study, you open up a book, and if you don't understand it, you read it again. If you don't understand it, you read it again. I was always pretty good at math, good at grammar. I didn't have a whole lot of great uh, comprehension, but that's kind of what I did. So I'd come home in high school, knock out my homework, play sports, work, or whatever. That's kind of what I did, but never really did any concentration of studying. So I went to Marine Military Academy, learned to study for the first time, reapplied, and got accepted to the Naval Academy. So that's kind of how that happened.
Tell us about your experience at the Naval Academy. And did you ever consider leaving the Naval Academy?
Well, like I said before, when Coach Sparks told me quitters never win, winners never quit, that was my mindset. So I go to the Naval Academy. I'm the only black in my company. My freshman year. I'm the only black in my company. Okay, so we're talking no blacks as sophomores, no blacks as juniors, and no blacks as seniors, right? But the lessons I learned at Spotsylvania High School served me well at the Naval Academy because I knew that everybody wants the same thing. They want to be loved, they want to be respected, they want to be successful. And I understood that people would say things that didn't make sense and they really, really didn't mean it. So I didn't get offended when people said things that may have been quote unquote off color because I understood what the deal was. If I was not prepared for that, I probably would not have handled it as well and it gotten all in my head and gotten all focused. So at the Naval Academy, I'm there. Um, and I'm only black in my company. But one of the things that I did master was I mastered military discipline. I mastered marching, wearing the uniform, and all that basic stuff. So I did not have to concentrate on. I understood that it was a game that I had to go through, right? But I guarantee you, if I had to spend time on that military stuff and spend time academically, I never would have made it. So I could focus on academics. And not that I was brilliant, but I focused on academics and made enough to graduate. Was that, I had two goals at the Naval Academy: not have to go to summer school, and what was the other one? Not have to go to summer school, and dang, what the other was?
Anything to
Oh,
do with
graduate.
football?
Not go to summer school and graduate on time.
Tell us about it. You played varsity football at the Naval Academy. Did you
I
did you also
did. I
play
did.
baseball?
No, yeah, no, I didn't go out for baseball. I played football at prep school, and then so that was kind of the focus that I was on. But yeah, played football at the Naval Academy, a great experience. One of the things I remember is doing football season, and I have to really, really manage my time
Mm.
because we had military stuff, we had academic stuff, and we had athletic stuff, and the plate was always full. But one of the things I learned was during football season, I was very efficient with my time. When it wasn't football season, I figured out ways to burn up the extra time that I had. So my grades really didn't change. That was something that I learned about how to be focused and how not to be focused and how I can, but anyway, it was a great experience. Learning how to deal with adversity, uh, learning how to communicate. But one of probably the most advantageous thing about the whole experience at the Naval Academy is the ability to develop a brotherhood with some of the best and brightest in the world. And that network is so strong and so powerful that it's bar none.
You 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 selected to join the Marine Corps out of the Naval Academy. How come?
Well, what happened was I service selection night, senior year. You have to determine what you're gonna do. You could go Navy, you could go Marine Corps, you could go submarines, you could go surface, aviation Navy, aviation Marine Corps. So I had determined that I was going to go Navy aviation. And 2 nights before service selection, I had a dream. And the dream was, I don't think I want to be on ships like that. Maybe I'll go in the Marine Corps and not be on ships like that. So that's kind of, and then I had the experience of the Marine Military Academy. So that's kind of how it happened. I knew I wanted to fly. I got enamored with aviation my second class year where we went to Pensacola. We got to fly in a helicopter. We got to fly on a jet. And at that point in time is when I decided I wanted to go aviation.
Okay, good. Um, now you've graduated from the Naval Academy, right? You're on your way to the Marine Corps. You go to the basic school, then you go to Pensacola for flight training, right? Any lessons that you took out of the basic school, Carl?
Lessons in the basic school, it was very similar to, um, I mean, it wasn't like a boot camp or anything like that. It was more training and development of how to be a Marine Corps officer, what kind of things you do, navigation, and some other stuff. So, I wouldn't say it was challenging. It was more of a finishing school, I would say, kind of like the officer
Yeah,
finishing school.
yeah. The basic school is pretty much a rite of passage, isn't it? It's something that all officers have to go through, and you're not going to advance until you finish the basic school. So, now, how was flight school, Carl? Tell us about that.
Flight school, the first day of ground school, which is learning about the aircraft and learning about weather and things like that. So you do ground school and then you start flying primary and then you go to advanced. So the first day of ground school, what they said was the attrition rate is 66%. So it's only one out of three of you that are going to get your wings in a year and a half. Only one out of three. I look to the left, I look to the right. I say, y'all not going to be here, but I'm going to be here because Coach Sparks said quitters never win, winners never quit. Right? So again, I had the mindset I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get out of flight school. So one of the things about flight school is a lot about procedures. You got to know your procedures. You got to know you have to be able to react instantly if you have an emergency. So I used to develop these 5x3 cards and I'd write on them an acronym. Okay, so let's say the procedure was uh, drop the clutch, uh, let the nose down. And anyway, so the acronym, the three letters of that would be like maybe BEET. So I had to say the emergency, BEET, and then I recite the whatever that emergency procedure was. So that's what I did. And I would actually run and recite the emergency procedures so that when the instructor asked me a question, I could spit it out. Not a whole lot different than being on in front of an upperclassman at the Naval Academy and they asked me a bunch of questions. Kind of the same thing, except you had to know your procedures. And I always told myself, I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot. So if the instructor asks me an emergency procedure, I'm going to know that emergency procedure whole. I might not fly good in the aircraft, but I'm gonna know my emergency procedure. Because if you have a pre-flight and you don't know your emergency procedure, that's not a good look. So I did that. The other thing I did, I'll talk about the network at the Naval Academy. So there's this saying at the Naval Academy, which is get the gouge. And getting the gouge means you get the information from somebody that's gone before you. So when I got to Pensacola, I had some classmates of mine that had gone through the program ahead of me. I said, tell me what I need to do to be successful to make it. And they told me some things to do. They said, spend a lot of time in this simulator, know your procedures, you know? So they told me those things. So that kind of gave me a leg up to be able to do that. Now, the other thing I saw was I saw several people wash out, and a lot of them didn't wash out because of inability. They were smart enough, they were strong enough, but it got to them mentally. They just, they gave up because the instructor got in their head or something like that, you know. But it was challenging. But the other thing that I realized when I was there, the attrition rate was one person graduating out of three. That's for the whole population. For people that look like me, it was one out of six. The attrition rate was double for African Americans.
Hmm. Recognizing those uh, recognizing those challenges, Carl Sharperson. Is anything more that you had to dig down to ensure that you succeeded at flight school?
Well, there's this thing where if you don't perform well enough in the aircraft, either on the ground or in the air, they give you what's called a down. So you can have, I don't know, there was a number of downs that you couldn't get. And I never got a down. I thought I had a refly, which means after sometimes you don't fly for a long time, you go up in your rusty, the instructor say, go back and get a refly. But I never had a down at flight school. So I'm pretty proud about that.
Okay.
But it
Now
was
you
really
were
rinse and repeat, Naval Academy, really sports, Naval Academy, flight school, some of the same principles, same mindset that I had.
okay. All right, Carl. How long did you serve in the Marine Corps?
I did 5.5 years in the Marine Corps. After basic school, I went to learn to fly the CH-46 helicopter. And then I did 2 6-month deployments to the Mediterranean Sea and 1 3-month deployment to the Caribbean, flying off of ships. When I was in, it was during the Cold War, so we were out there, snooping and pooping with the Russians. But I got to see a lot of the world.
Okay. All right. Now you made a decision to leave the Marine Corps. Okay. Why did you do that, Carl? Why'd you leave?
Well, I had a year left of my obligation, and at the time, I think I needed to give 6 months notice before I got out. So I had to let them know 6 months in advance. So when I got to that point in my career, I thought I wanted to become an HMX-1 pilot, who are the pilots that fly for the president. Because there were a couple of people in the squadron that had done that, and I said that'd be pretty cool, right? So my plan was to go to Pensacola, get a bunch of flight hours, and then try to get to HMX-1. I don't think that's a great career move in the Marine Corps as far as punching tickets, but that's kind of what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So I did not have those orders. So I said, okay, I got to give at least 6 months of notice. So I got to determine what I'm going to do. I said, so I need at least go and look at some other opportunities and see what else is out there. So I interviewed with several companies. One of them was Procter and Gamble. So I interviewed with Procter and Gamble, and didn't have orders to Pensacola, and I needed to give my notice, so I gave my resignation. Right. Shortly after that, I got orders to Pensacola, but I'd already determined that I was going to get out. So I got out of the Marine Corps and joined Procter and Gamble in Albany, Georgia, where the logistics base is for the Marine Corps.
Okay. All right. Now you've served in the Marine Corps and you've transitioned out, right? You're now working for Procter and Gamble and you're in Georgia. Tell us now you've let's talk about your family life, Carl. How did you and your wife meet? And do you have children?
We met when I was in Albany, Georgia. She was a student at Albany State, and I was working for Procter and Gamble. And we met at a party, and we dated for a little while, and then we didn't see each other for another year. Then we got back together again. And um, and I was I was skeptical about getting married, right? Because and my fear was that my wife's goals did not line up with my goals, right? So I went through this thing at Procter and Gamble called Gold Mine Training, and it was actually put together by a former Navy aviator. Can't remember his name now. Anyway, so what it does is it talks about the seven pillars of life. So you talk about that, you prioritize things. At the end of it, you talk about what's important to you. So I did that process and I asked her to do that. So I took her through the process. I read what she had and I said, we want the same thing. So that's kind of what got me off the dime. And she says, what you gonna do? Because I got other things to do. I got some other people interested. So I said, okay, well, let me go ahead and seal this deal. So we ended up getting married.
Okay, Carl. So you and your wife is Jackie,
Correct.
right? You and Jackie got married. Married what? 2 years after you left the Marine Corps?
I left the Marine Corps in 81. We got married in 86.
Okay, so
Mhm.
so you got a good 5 years
86.
out. Yeah. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Uh, there was a question to ask: did the Marine Corps a career impact your family life? But you were already separated from the Marine Corps, so you were not married as a Marine officer. All right.
Correct. But one of my mindsets about that was I wasn't sure that I wanted to marry somebody and and be separated a lot.
Okay.
That did go into my thinking, but it never, never came to pass. Didn't have to cross that bridge.
So up until this point, Carl Sharpson, you're now a married man, and you're still working for Procter and Gamble.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I worked for Procter and Gamble in Albany, Georgia for 5.5 years.
Okay.
And the unique thing about that experience was, and this is what attracted me to that experience was the plant was founded in 1971. I got there in 1981. When I got there in 1981, 40% of the technicians were African American. 20% of the managers were African American. 20% of the managers were women. Unheard of in Southwest Georgia. You don't even see that today. But the leadership of Procter and Gamble in 71 said, we're going to hire the same multicultural mix as the community. So going into that environment, learning from people that look like me, understanding really how to thrive in diverse environments. It was a life-changing experience that I had. And some of those lessons I still keep with me. I learned from, the second black plant manager in all of Procter and Gamble, third black plant manager all of Procter and Gamble, and so there were some high-powered people, and I just learned a lot about how to navigate this world specifically as a person of color.
You've been able to bring a lot of these experiences from your past into leadership opportunities. That is, you had starting over Washington D.C., then you moved to Spotsylvania, Virginia, which was a completely different environment from Washington D.C. Then you matriculated to the Naval Academy. You learned a lot of great things about life at the Naval Academy that helped you succeed in the Marine Corps. Now you transition and you're a civilian now. All right, married, working at Procter Gamble, and you begin to even observe and take note of a lot of other things that are happening. Tell us, what jobs did you have? What jobs did you have after Procter and Gamble, Carl?
Okay, I worked at Procter& Gamble in the plant for 5 years,
Okay.
and then I worked in Cincinnati for 2 years at corporate headquarters. And I worked in Bounty, tissue, Pampers, and started up several of those products in the Albany plant. At the headquarters in Cincinnati, I was a manufacturing planner for Bounty Towel, so it was a staff job. Um, and then I worked for Frito-Lay for 3 years in Frankfort, Indiana, which is 30 miles north of Indianapolis, Indiana. So I go from an organization, Procter& Gamble, that's very paternalistic, which means they hire and promote from within. And then Frito steals people from Coca-Cola, P&G, and G, and places like that, bring them in, give them some money, say, go make it happen. That's kind of the Frito-Lay environment was very, very tough. It wasn't a nurturing, healthy environment, kind of backbiting, PepsiCo. Anyway, that was kind of so I went from a culture like that to another culture. So I didn't want to work in that culture, but I learned some things. I learned a lot about how to work in that environment. So I interviewed and ended up taking a job with Colgate Palmolive in Topeka, Kansas. Company was actually Hill's Pet Nutrition. We made science diet and prescription diet cat and dog food. And I was a plant manager in that facility. First time I'd ever worked in a union facility, right? Um, so I trained for a year and then became the plant manager of that facility. So I took all the skills that I had, military, Procter& Gamble, Frito-Lay, and we had the best performing plant in the system. We had the oldest plant, the only union in the company, oldest equipment, and 80% of the workforce was illiterate. And we were the best performing plant in the system. And I used the skills that I used in all these other places. Making sure you're clear about the expectations, make sure you hold people accountable, take care of your people, do what you say you're going to do. Those basic things that I learned in the Marine Corps, that I learned at Procter& Gamble, applied them all, and we were very successful. So I was a plant manager for 3 years. Then I took a position in sales for 3 years, still in Topeka, Kansas. And one day I went into my boss and he could tell, I guess, that something wasn't right. And he says, I want to ask you 2 questions before you say anything. He says, are you doing what you want to do? And are you doing it where you want to do it? I said, no and no. He says, okay, we're going to do some downsizing, some reorganizations. I'm going to get you a package. So he got me a 6-month package. In that 6 months package, 6 months of pay, I had an opportunity to work for a company called Drake Beam Morin, which is a career transition company. It helps executives transition to other positions. And I learned a lot in that experience. I actually traveled an hour going to Kansas City every day to mimic the fact that I was going into work. And then I called companies, send them resumes, practice interviewing, and all things like that. So after about 4 or 5 months, I landed a job as the vice president of manufacturing for Dunlap Schlosinger in Westminster, South Carolina, not too far from Clemson. And we made Schlosinger, Dunlap, and Max Fly golf balls and clubs. Headquartered in England, I was based in South Carolina. I thought it was my dream job. I died and went to heaven because I became a golf enthusiast, you know. So I'm in that environment. And after about 6 months, it became clear that my boss and I agreed to disagree.
Mm.
So at about the 11-month period, I get a call from my administrative assistant named Nancy, and Nancy says, the Eagle has landed. The Eagle has landed. The Eagle was my boss who flew in from England, and I didn't know he was coming. So I called my wife and said, Jackie, Stan's in town and something might go down. Don't worry, God will provide. Sure enough, he and the HR manager come into my office. He says, you know why I'm here, right? I said, no, I don't. He said, well, things aren't working out. I said, I agree with that. So we talked, we agreed to disagree, and we decided to part ways. So that day or the next day, I was cleaning out my office on the off shift, right? And my third shift supervisor came in. He said, what are you doing, Carl? Where you going? I says, I'm no longer working for the company. He started crying. He said, Carl, you the best manager we ever had. My point is sometimes you don't realize the impact you make until it's time to go. Sometimes you never know.
I got you. Carl, when you were plant manager and you had that much success, how many people is that we're talking about?
We had about 1,000 people in the manufacturing plant, uh, three-shift operation. And
Okay.
we took ingredients and because science diet is like prescription dog food. So it's vitamins and minerals and meats and different things like that. So all that stuff gets blended in. And so we sold canned and bagged dog food.
Well, I tell you, Carl Sharpson, one of the reasons that I recommended that we speak to you in the Veterans in Transition philosophy here is because you're a published author and you're an entrepreneur. Please tell us what inspired you to write your first book, Paul. Now, we're at this point in your life, right? You're married, to Jackie, but you've just gotten removed from a job, all right? So take us forward and how did that impact you on writing a book?
Okay. Well, I'll start with 12 years ago, 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer. So that journey was a pretty extensive, mind-blowing, mind-changing experience, life-changing experience, significant emotional event. And during that time period, I did some journaling about different things. So about 8 years ago, I decided that I wanted to take what I'd written down in different pieces and put it together in a book because I thought it could help people because of the different experiences that I had. But I was intimidated by the fact that it had to be grammatically correct, had to flow, had to make sense, and would people read it, right? So my daughter, who at the time was 23, she's 20, 25 at the time, she calls me, she says, Dad, are you serious about writing your book? I said, yes. She says, are you committed to writing your book?
Hmm.
I said, yes. She said, if you're committed to writing your book, uh, I found a book coach and I'll connect you with the book coach and I'll pay for the services up through the manuscript. So that took away all my angst about grammatically correct and stuff like that. So I connected with the book coach, who at the time was 35 years old. He says, I want you to just think about some titles that you want the book, because it's about my life, some titles that you want to talk about. So I said, okay, I want to talk about me growing up, talk about my aviation experience, talk about my cancer journey, talk about corporate America. So I put those titles there, and then I just started writing. And then I sent it to her. She asked me some questions, send it back. I do some more, do some more. So I did that for about 4 months, and it was done. I had the vision of the cover being my scarlet wings from aviation, not scarlet wings, my gold wings from aviation, scarlet and gold, which are the colors of the Marine Corps. I had a Mameluke sword on it, which is a Marine Corps sword. My daughter did the bio on the back. A cousin who's a lawyer did the forward, and it just kind of came together. Um, and I felt that I had some things that I wanted to share with others because my experience has been if you mentor slash learn from others, it can definitely increase your trajectory and reduce your pain. So I wanted to share that with other people. And then I also had the idea of after each chapter, making it kind of like a self-help book where you ask questions. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently? I had a 17-year Marine Corps veteran, got out of Marine Corps, post-traumatic stress disorder, became a substance abuser. Then he became homeless. Now he runs a shelter for homeless veterans. He says it's the first book he ever read from cover to cover in his life.
Tell us about the business of writing a book or writing two books, and what has it done for you?
Well, it for me, somebody asked me on a podcast a couple of months ago,
Mhm.
what are you most proud of? And I said the thing that I'm most proud of in my life, I think, other than rearing healthy, happy, productive young people, is being able to leave a legacy of my life, my
Mhm.
lessons on how to navigate this life. So the first book talks about how to navigate this life and be productive, do what you say you're going to do, take care of your people, all those leadership lessons that I learned throughout my life. And then my second book, Sharp Leadership Parenting Principles for Rearing Young People, is my take on strategies on how to rear healthy, happy, productive young people. It talks about bullying, social media. It talks about starting with the end in mind, extracurricular activities. So again, it's laid out the same way. It has different chapters, and after each chapter, it says, "What did you learn? What are you going to do differently?" And they're all stories about my 36-year-old son, my 33-year-old daughter. Lessons learned. So it goes through a scenario and say, "This is what happened. This is what I learned. This was the outcome."
Carl, in on the business side of writing a book, right? You host seminars throughout the year, right? Tell us about that, Carl.
Yeah, I'll do it this way. So one of the things I think I've identified my gift, and one of my giftings is the ability to help people. So I help individuals gain clarity in where they want to go and what they want to do, because you can't do everything, right? Sometimes the smartest people in the world are the most paralyzed because they can do everything, but you can't do everything at the same time. So I help them get clarity about what's going on. Then, all the stuff that's going on, what are the one or two, three strategies that you're going to focus on that's going to get you the maximum return? And then I help them develop a game plan, roadmap on how to do that. So simplistically, that's really what I do. I do that through speaking, business consulting, executive coaching, strategic planning, team building workshops, and then my book. I can take my first book, Sharp Leadership, I could do a team building workshop, strategic planning workshop, diversity, equity, inclusion workshop, because what it does is it opens up people's minds. And then once you figure out what you want to work on, you say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the strategy. Let's put together the plan.
What types of organizations normally ask you to visit them? In other words, what types of organizations hire you to come in to host?
Nonprofits like United Way, Goodwill, colleges like Clemson, South Carolina State, Claflin University, North Carolina, University of North, and so higher education. I actually lecture uh, to a California Dominguez Hill school out in California. Ambassador Rose um, was an ambassador for Reagan, and he actually teaches a meditation, a mediation course out in California. And he has me come in there as a guest lecturer for that. Um, Fortune 500 companies, Purdue, um, entrepreneurs, startups, small companies, big companies, really anybody that has people, and every organization has people, then you have some type of leadership. So they're applicable in all of those arenas, and I've operated in all of them.
Yeah, earlier you cited an individual who had read your book and was about 70 years old. Tell us, can you give us a couple more of your success stories or what you see as success? In other words, they brought you in, you conducted an analysis, you had your leadership seminar, and then you had some results. Tell us about that, Carl.
Gotcha, gotcha. So Claflin University, I'll use that as an example. Yeah. They had me come in and I work with their staff as well as their faculty.
Now, Clapton is a university in North Carolina.
It's in South Carolina, Orangeburg, South Carolina,
Okay.
HBCU. Orangeburg, South Carolina, which
Okay.
is where my dad's from. My dad's from Orangeburg. And my daughter actually graduated from Claflin. So I knew the president. He had me
Okay.
come in and I did some work with the staff, faculty.
Okay.
They all got a copy of my book. And I'd have seminars with them to talk about that. And basically the way I do it is it's always personal. So people have an opportunity to work on things that they need to work on. And everybody doesn't need to work on the same thing.
Yeah.
But when people leave, everybody is individually made better because of the things that that they wanted to work on that they got worked on. So that's an example. Uh, Purdue Farms, which is a um, chicken company headquartered in Delaware. I did a seminar with them. They had a diversity, equity, inclusion seminar, so they made me the guest speaker. Did some work with them, and they transformed their organization. Um, there's some individuals that I've worked with, coaching them. Some are military officers, some of them are executives, some of them are young people, and they come in and they get clarity about what they want to work on, and it's transformational to watch people do that. And it's really where how I get my energy and how I get my rewards in life. And I do the
Understood.
same thing with young people.
Yeah, and you and I have been friends for many years, and I've always noted whenever you text me or call me, I always ask you where you are because because 9 times out of 10 you're not at your home in South Carolina. You're on the road. You're in New Jersey or you're along the on the East Coast or you're at a university. So that's one thing I always make sure that I see up front. Hey, Carl, where are you calling me from? Where are we talking? What are you doing? So you stay pretty busy, I take it.
It's a lot of need out there. If you take the pandemic, I mean, our system, I think that our educational system is really, really flawed. So when you think about things like critical thinking, mental toughness, taking care of your people, some basic principles like that, uh, there's a lot of people that don't have that.
Yeah.
So um, I try to reach out to individuals to help organizations and individuals close that gap.
Okay. All right. Carl, this is Veterans in Transition is a program designed by Mr. Rodney Miner, but he speaks to veterans, and that's essentially I believe his calling, so there are a lot of veterans out there are viewing this program. Why don't you and on this occasion it's Veterans Day 2024. Do you want to any kind of message you want to send out to our veterans, please?
Yeah, probably the biggest challenge that I've ever had in my life are health challenges. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. So 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma, right? There's no stage 5, right? So being able to, I use the same skill set or mindset when I was at the Naval Academy, going through plebe summer or football camp or whatever. Never quit, figure out what you're gonna do, keep your head down, keep working, and hopefully it'll get better. So that's kind of what I did. I had 6 rounds of chemo. Um, by the time I was diagnosed, I looked like I was 6 months pregnant, sunken in face, sunken in arms, looked like one of the starving kids from Africa. But I overcame that through those lessons as well as the brotherhood at the Naval Academy. My wife, 4 years ago, was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, 16 rounds of chemotherapy, double mastectomy, reconstructive surgery. Um, she's cancer free now, right? So so when you're going through it yourself, that's a perspective. But when your spouse is going through it, that's a different perspective. And then 2.5 years ago, I had 6 inches of my colon taken out for colon cancer.
Hmm.
So all of those challenges are those, and I had a brain tumor removed in 1983. Anyway, but those health challenges, when you get to a point where you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, you're not smart enough, you don't have enough money in the bank, that's a whole different perspective on life. And so my wife and I, one of the things I found going through the cancer journey is people have three different reactions. Either they tell everybody, they tell nobody, or they do something in the middle. And whatever they do, you got to respect it. Because different people process stuff different ways. But I became very bold in that, and my wife will him up a lady in a heartbeat and say, "You need to get your mammogram," because she's that passionate about it, because she understands how important screening is. Uh, Health screenings for breast cancer, prostate cancer. Those screenings are important, especially for our people of color. So I wanted to put that out there. And my wife did a video, a testimony about her challenges and struggles. And that's kind of, so that's one thing that I would give the veterans. The other thing is how important it is. I think that I compare veterans to professional athletes, and these are the similarities. Both organizations have very high standards when it comes to uh, um, physicality. It's very physical. It's very challenging. You know when you win. You have to pull together. You always take care of your people, and you always tell the truth. Those are some common things, commonalities between a veteran and an athlete. Now, when that veteran gets out of the military, and or that athlete stops playing, there's some things that are missing. All that stuff that I'm talking about is missing. They're isolated. They're missing all that stuff, right? So they're unfulfilled. So somehow you gotta refill that things that's missing. You can have somebody that's an athlete and they're used to people coming up to them all the time, giving them what they want, and treating them like royalty. When they get isolated, they can get depressed. Veterans can get depressed. Here's the other thing that happens with veterans. Because of all the things that you're used to in the military, you go to the civilian world and you have none of that. Okay. So after about 9 months to a year, you say, "I'm out of here," because your boss lied to you, something went wrong, or whatever, right? You go to someplace else. After about a year, the same thing happens. You go someplace else. After about a year, the same thing happens. And finally, after that third place, you say, "What's wrong with me?" There's nothing wrong with you. There's a misalignment of values. So as a veteran transitioning, the most important thing you can do when you do something else is get clear alignment of values with your boss and the organization in order to be successful. Otherwise, it's going to be a rocky road.
Okay, Carl Sharperson, that sounds like sound advice for veterans who transition, because it's different. It's different because I just retired approximately 7 months ago, and I see that things are different as a retiree, as opposed to you're working every day, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, etc. But just like you said, that there are, because of the cohesiveness of the veterans community, there are always veterans close by that you can talk to, and that's made, I think that makes a lot of difference for all of us veterans out there. Well, Carl Sharperson, former captain, United States Marine Corps, aviator, published author, and entrepreneur. We want to thank you this afternoon for sharing your experiences with us in the Veterans in Transition program.